and welcome to the SmackDown Preview Podcast. I'm Adam Wilborn from WhatCulture, joined by one of the Dudley Boys, Michael Hamlet, and Phil Chambers from WhatCulture to look ahead to tonight's episode of SmackDown on Fox. But before we get into it, if you're a fan of this sort of thing, make sure you subscribe to WhatCulture Wrestling on either iTunes, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts from, for daily wrestling podcasts, where we not only review SmackDown and Raw, but also the Wednesday Night War between AEW and NXT pay-per-views. We have interviews, roundtable discussions, and a roundup of the week, complete with a bloody good quiz, of course, on WrestleCulture. But as I said, joined by Michael Hamlet and Phil Chambers to look ahead to SmackDown tonight, and lots of TLC fallout to deal with.
I'm excited for this, gotta say. Never been on a preview podcast before. I'm ready. I'm ready for some top-class wrestling analysis.
Don't build it up so much, Phil. I suppose the main thing we need to start by talking about is what is next for Daniel Bryan and Bray Wyatt. Of course, a shaved, sort of American Dragon version of Daniel Bryan made an appearance at TLC, and this was after Bray Wyatt, I should mention, not The Fiend, had defeated The Miz. So how on earth do you reckon they follow that up tonight? Right, I'm going to turn this off because it's really off-putting. There we go.
It behooves us to try and find the consensus rather than just throwing up and regurgitating all our opinions on the wrestling world of a Monday morning after a pay-per-view or of a Friday morning before a SmackDown. But I can't figure out what people think of Bray Wyatt at this point. I dared to be critical of him on the pay-per-view, and my word was I told I was wrong by a lot of angry people with The Fiend in their avatar. There is definitely a fan base for this. There's definitely people that still loved it when he looked like a whack-a-mole popping his head out to get Seth. There's people that loved him pulling Daniel Bryan's pubes out. There are people that are okay with the fact that Bryan just disappeared without explanation. I'm not one of them, so I'd at least like that. Like, where's he been other than the barbers over the last fortnight? Because, like, unless the Firefly Funhouse has, like, a really nice old-fashioned Turkish place where you can get your beard done cutthroat or something like that, which, to thus be fair to someone like Phil, probably sounds like an ideal joint, you know? Like, I'd never get use out of it. Bray wouldn't want anything to do with me, so I'd be fine. But, like, I need some explanation now. They can't keep saying, oh, what's the answer to that? Wacky Bray stuff, because that will put us exactly where we were before. That's projections on the ring. That's Finn Balor getting covered in bolognese, viscous acidic liquid, because they can't say blood. All of this will get us back to where we were unless they finally start joining the dots. Bryan is always the man that does that, often when it seems like dots can't be found, because number one is over there and number two's in AEW when he tries to join dots, and yet he does it somehow. So surely now he's back, he's the one that can create a bit of actual story to any of this.
I was really hoping Bryan had come out with like early Mankind days, like patchy hair or something, or like when Kane first revealed his first face and his hair was like all over the place. Absolutely nothing, just a really nice, well-shaved look.
And he hasn't aged a day, we should point out.
Yeah, nothing advocates that lifestyle, like that, like living green or eating clean, whatever it is that he does, than his own face. You know?
I should say as well, WWE have started selling blow-up versions of that hammer thing, so I fully expect him to be like bonking someone on the head with
maybe
that,
Michael
like
Cole.
Timmy Mallet style.
Maybe Michael Cole will actually recognise it now.
I've spent a lot, more than is like normal of my adult life, defending Doink to people. Why would I bother? Because in 2019 we've got a worse one and they've put the top title on him. Honest to God, blow up hammers. Like, what, are they going to flog it for $6,000 because they're only making 12 of them or something? It's just garbage.
What do you
I'm
think
up and
of
down
Bray
with
Wyatt?
the Bray Wyatt thing. I liked him at the beginning, obviously. He went a bit down home with the stuff, obviously. That was really, really bad. And then, like, the Daniel Bryan, I wasn't huge on the dragging him down into hell and then pulling out his hair thing. That was just a bit weird. But I thought it sort of started climbing back up again to something good when it was coming up to the Miz match. I liked the sort of home invasion, like, really crappy B-movie kind of style horror movie stuff. Like, I enjoyed that. I thought Miz sold it quite well in terms of his character. And I thought that was like, okay.
Mrs. Daughter sold it very well.
Mrs. Daughter sold it spectacularly. So I thought they were like back onto something with him maybe. And then, the pay-per-view happened. That hammer, man. Stop using that hammer as a weapon. Just stop.
They got the match wrong, because everything you've just said, I would say, is true. And Bray became like a fearsome force again because you wanted to believe that the Fiend was the one going in. So you don't want the Fiend. I wouldn't want the Fiend in my kids' bedrooms. You know, like, I'd be that or Jerry Lawler. I can't think of anything worse. But like,
I was more intrigued by Bray Wyatt as a character as well going into that TLC pay-per-view than I have since like the very early days when he was first doing the Firefly Funhouse.
He can't come out as a babyface taking selfies and being like, I'm so glad to be here.
I like that.
I like it, but then the guy in the ring is justified in wanting to kill him because he's like gone into his home, and then fans are going like, yowie, wowie, and he's like, this is so great. I was in his house 3 weeks ago. Like, who's the babyface and who's the heel? And none of that, like, I like every bit of it as an individual part, but it never makes sense as a whole story. And like, fair enough, I would say that's just my opinion, but watch that match again. There is an audience there confused with how to react to things in a match that doesn't really make sense as a wrestling match.
I think myself and Adam Nicholas were doing the live stream for it, and we enjoyed the entrance, and arguably right at the beginning when he was like, "Hey, calm down, Miz." Miz is trying to murder him for obvious reasons. Yeah. But then it just you wanted a more obvious flicking of a switch. I feel.
Yeah.
Do you remember
it was
when
the whole trying to play off the like, oh, he's loving it, he's laughing through the pain kind of stuff. Like they've tried that with so many characters down the road, and it's never really like settled. Like it's never really fit.
At no point should Seth versus Bray be used as like the example of how they did something well. But do you remember when Seth burned it down, and Bray turned up as Bray, like with tears in his eyes, saying, "What are you doing?" That is a man that like should have that character has empathy. It's the Fiend that has none, and yet because they were having Bray dropping in with his sister Abigail and stuff like that, they've blurred that line now. And I think it's really tricky to try and like create the sort of gap between the two. Bray, as much as I loved all that, and maybe within a year you could have got there, he should have been like the kind of the Firefly Funhouse exclusive, and the Fiend should have been the physical manifestation. And it's like I say, it's going to take Bryan carrying the load as usual, trying to make all of this somehow make sense.
It's going to be intriguing as well how they take this from now to the Royal Rumble, and how they deal with, the fact this is effectively a rematch, but it's not, because it's a new Daniel Bryan. It's a different version of Bray Wyatt.
The new Daniel Bryan.
Yes. So I'm
new, old, really old.
Yeah. Yeah, it's fascinating going forward, but opinion does seem to be really divided upon Bray Wyatt. One person opinion isn't divided upon in terms of the locker room is Roman Reigns, because everyone hates him. And I don't mean that in terms of some amazing backstage story. I mean, why did no one come to save him when he was in basically a handicap match at TLC? Yes, there was the subsequent brawl, and then the show went off the air where they went, look, Asuka's won the titles. Right, enough of that. Let's have a look at Roman Reigns spearing Baron Corbin off a big platform onto some
Also,
goobers.
apparently they'd been fighting for like an hour at that point or something.
Yeah.
And no one had helped him in all of that hour either. They'd been backstage, they'd been all over the place, and people are just watching him go by, going, yeah, whatever.
Like Shorty G was in the ring, but it's just, you couldn't see Baron Corbin just trotting him, it happens. It's a weird old quirk of this story, isn't it? That nobody ever saves Roman Reigns. The dog food was one thing because they had to get the visual out. An hour's worth of fighting around a building. Like, they must have gone into the locker room at some point. Oh, boys, I'm up against it here. Like, it's something that they've like not addressed. And all of this, again, a bit of backward WWE storytelling. All of this comes weeks after like people were literally on a team led by Roman Reigns at the Survivor Series.
Making a huge deal, especially, and they're still making a big deal out of the fact that he is the locker room leader, and that's the position that Baron Corbin wants. Doesn't look like you are, mate.
It just was so surreal, especially when I didn't necessarily have that much of a problem when Dolph Ziggler got involved, because that makes sense in those circles in terms of Dolph and Baron teaming up to cover him in dog food or hit him with dog food cans or whatever it is. Yep. A full dog food can as well, we should point out. But it's when the Revival got involved and the New Day didn't come to help. And I was like, we can't have one half and be like, yeah, New Day aren't that bothered. And also then you got subsequent chance for the Uso. We were speculating like maybe someone like insane like John Cena could come out and save Roman Reigns, or the Usos could return. Now, of course, we reported this week that Jimmy Uso, I do believe, was found not guilty. So do you think perhaps we could see the Usos return tonight on SmackDown?
It's got to be the only logical step you can take from this.
If anyone else comes out and says, I'll team with you, if Roman's completely this right to go, where the bloody hell were you on Sunday?
I think it's really, we preview this show with increasing like depression and desperation because SmackDown is the $1 billion show. And as we keep saying, it's worse than Raw. It's worse than Jesus Christ, why do I do this with my life, Monday Night Raw. And what worries me is that they think I'm basing this on the pay-per-view, they think that like the big Roman Baron payoff is like a ratings winner because there is no pay-per-view now before the Royal Rumble. And if they commit the crime of having this being on the Rumble undercard and taking both those two out of the Rumble match, like you can forget the Battle Royal itself, can't you? That match without Roman Reigns in just doesn't feel right in 2020. Mind, it comes to something when you could have a situation where Roman and Bryan could both be in a Rumble again, and that never went wrong before. But like theoretically, they're going to pay this off on television, so you've got like more story to tell somehow before you eventually get your dog collar match.
There's plenty more dog dog like memes and
Yeah.
jokes and stupid nonsense that they can pull out. Please, 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 Kennel from Hell. I won't be happy with anything else.
I think it ends with Baron Corbin. I've thought about this a bit more, dog-related stuff. You know those like pet carriers that you take your pets to the like the vet with? I think there's an oversized one of them on the stage.
Like an ambulance match.
But yeah, or like a dumpster, but it's like a pet carrier match. And Roman pushes him in it and closes the door. And then like sort of the old SmackDown fist return and picks it up and carries it off of SmackDown.
And he goes off to get his balls chopped off.
How long can you keep it going though for? Like elimination kennels? You could do like, 4 little kennels in the corners.
Please no. Before we get to fixing SmackDown for next year, because I do think that's a really important thing to consider as we head towards the end of the year, we should talk about the other things that are going to be taking place on SmackDown tonight. Shinsuke Nakamura and Cesaro are going to be challenging The New Day. The New Day, of course, defeating The Revival in a really good ladder match at TLC. An interesting combo, especially with Sami Zayn added into the mix. I like this for the SmackDown Tag Team division.
Yeah, it's not particularly got any great story to latch onto, but the match will be quality. We say this every week because you just look for a shining light in a dark tunnel, but Sami Zayn is that every single week. What he's done for Nakamura, he's also extended now into Cesaro. And this feels like a match for the sake of a match, but like, let that be great. I can't be critical of something where all the parts individually are so great, even if there's not a lot of story building up to it. So I think this will be solid.
And with
two questions for this. Why do they hate The Revival so much? Lost at the pay-per-view straight after they sort of revamped their characters, sort of going back like, yeah, we're going to go back to the old school, what made us us, in that big promo at the end of SmackDown. And then, oh yeah, now they're just more Baron Corbin guys.
Well, the only speculation that came out of TLC from watching the pre-show that me and Nicholas picked up on is the fact they had a big moment with Booker T and, talking about being a tag team, talking about being better than him. And it's probably not going to happen. But if you've decided, right, we're going to keep the titles on the New Day and we're going to do something else with the Revival included in this bollocks with the Roman Reigns stuff, having the Revival feud with old tag teams, I think could be a perfect thing for them to do. And someone like Harlem Heat, it's completely feasible that could happen. And, it's not like they just did that on the pre-show and it was never mentioned again. It was followed up on WWE backstage. So you're telling me there's a chance.
It's kind of a last chance as well, because like the only likable thing on SmackDown anymore is the stage, and that turned on them 2 weeks ago. So they're like, at this point, nobody likes the Revival. Like nothing about WWE wants the Revival to work. So yeah, that's probably their last go at this. They run through those Hall of Fame type teams to prove themselves the greatest of all time.
Just redo that, but with tag teams.
Yeah, and then it means that when they do take their release and go to AEW, WWE hasn't given any proper tag teams some on the way out. So.
The other question is, why do they hate the Intercontinental title so much?
Yeah, I was thinking that. I was about to say, maybe we could have Shinsuke and Cesaro as tag champions. And I was like, wait, then you'd have Shinny 2 belt.
I think, was it Sidgwick that pointed out that the Intercontinental title doesn't photo very well? So I don't think yet they've got a beauty shot of Nakamura with that belt. They're maybe thinking, do we need to get the old one back before we put it on our next big babyface? Do we need somebody to actually see it?
It does fit bizarrely well with his outfit, like his entrance and stuff. It always looks nice in the entrances, but that's about it. Well, that's the only time you ever see it anyway.
It's the only time it matters.
Yeah.
The other match scheduled for SmackDown this week is a rematch between Dana Brooke and Bayley. Thoughts?
I mean, they're sort of doing their best at it. Lacey Evans was being teed up as an opponent for Bayley, so that's where we're going, whether we like it or not, I think. But Dana Brooke has sort of found her footing here, hasn't she? As bizarrely, of all the women on that SmackDown roster not getting used, Dana Brooke has been the one to rise above that and almost work her own angle to get into this match. It was the Batista stuff that seemed to get her on television with Elias, and it's the Elias stuff that seemed to got her 2 wrestling matches in the space of 2 weeks. So I just admire the graft.
Yeah.
I think the match was all right last week. She hit a Batista bomb to pop the boys on Twitter, fair play to her.
Bailey's flex appeal.
Yeah, Bailey said, I think the title's not going to be on the line.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So Dana's going to steal one, probably because of a women's right or something like that. And then they do that sort of addition by subtraction, whereby bringing Bailey down, that gets Dana Brooke up. You notice that my levels haven't gone there or there because everybody's about there.
They even said it in the tweets, the back and forth thing, that Dana Brooke wasn't on Bailey's level. She was like, oh yeah, it wasn't about me coming up to your level. It was about me proving where I am.
God, such a
so you're proving that you're worse than Bailey. I'm like, why is it?
I want to show that one day I might have some ambition. Yeah, I feel so sorry for this browbeaten roster that I just like seeing some of them have a good time sometimes. So I feel like heading into Christmas, Dana Brooke can say, this last month's been pretty good. Like, good for her. Like, I know that's like the faintest possible praise, but good for her.
Absolutely.
Thoroughly looking forward to another incredibly chauvinistic, sexist Elias song to ruin it all.
Yeah.
Nice, easy question to finish on then. How do you make SmackDown good in 2020?
Well-
What needs to change?
Oh, I was going to say more dog stuff, and that's no change at all, is it? It needs... I can't believe I'm saying this because it's December and the new deal started in October, but it needs an overhaul of $1 billion shows level. It needs more than that beautiful stage that it first started with. What they've done is they've decided to continue what was happening on SmackDown Live on Tuesdays, which was reasonable pro wrestling with occasional bright spots, and thus ignored that SmackDown Live was like quite a bit of a wasteland of stars. You can't just put Roman Reigns on there and it suddenly feel like a bigger show by his placement on it. There's not been enough work put into the remainder of the undercard that makes this show feel like it's worth the money being paid for it. Worse still, it happens on a Friday, so the conversation is lesser on a Saturday because there's people kind of catching up with it over the weekend rather than the urgency in midweek. You need now to almost, I hate to use this sort of guy's name when I'm trying to improve on a show, but you need to take the Vince Russo philosophy
Oh my God.
of starting,
What has happened?
of starting from the bottom of the card and working up. Roman Reigns has been brought over because he's a star, so theoretically his angles will write themselves and Vince McMahon will always protect his top line. They need to go right to the bottom of that WWE personnel Wikipedia page and start booking for everybody working upwards, because even Bayley, the women's champion, or even the New Day, the tag team champions, aren't really being written for, or it certainly doesn't feel when you're watching like they're being written for. So if you imagine if they're not getting much of a shake of it, what about everybody else on the card? What about, we joke, but what about Shorty G and Ali G, you know, the Sacha Baron Corbins that have formed a team over the past couple of weeks based on moderate success on Team Hogan 3 months ago? We know nothing of them now on SmackDown. You know, there's countless guys in those situations. What about Carmella in the women's division? What's Carmella doing at all since she's been separated from R-Truth? There's a raft of characters with nothing to do, and they need to give that significant, they need to readdress that, because we're heading into WrestleMania season. Those cards are like 4 days long. They've got to be filled with something.
I'm astonished that they don't tease more each week. You know, you look at...
We were talking about that
Well,
before.
the fact we came in here, we're like, what are we going to bloody talk
like,
about?
literally, those topics that we've run down, is they're selling this show to the world.
Roman Reigns wasn't even mentioned on WWE.com's preview of tonight's show.
Yeah.
Right. And then you
Coming
compare...
from a pay-per-view as well. It's not like it's just a middle of the road, like
Exactly.
middle of the
They're not
month
spinning
match.
their wheels. And you look at something like NXT, it's just beaten AEW in the ratings. And granted, that's due to very good booking as well.
Yeah.
But the fact that they promise, right, next week you're getting 2 title matches, or next week you're getting a blow off of this feud, or whatever. They never tease that. You never hear on Raw, make sure you watch SmackDown. And I realise that's, you know, kind of difficult with it being on different TV networks and what have you.
Yeah, I do
But
wonder what the rules are for that.
They very rarely say, next week on SmackDown, this will be resolved. It's always just, hopefully people
Even
turn
on
in
their own
next
social
week.
media or stuff, something like that, they just, like, Big Dog Unchained was their huge selling point for last week. What is that?
Are you ready for a good time? Shouldn't be like rhetorical. It's just, I don't know. Am I like, can you tell me if I am or not? Backstage, even I'm in I use the word privilege quite loosely, a privileged position to write that up for the website. But backstage is quite an enjoyable waste of an hour if you're going to waste an hour on WWE. It kind of tries to make sense of some of the silly that we see on SmackDown, because Fox want SmackDown to work. This is still a network that wants to get some return on their huge investment, and yet it's hard to see how they're getting that. Like, the ratings have at least stabilised, so they must be happy enough with what they're getting.
Which I'm astonished at, by
Well-
the way,
Yeah.
that people are consistently tuning in when this is what they're handed every Friday.
Maybe they've found the habitual viewers from that vast percentage of Fox's potential audience. You know, a lot of homes in America have this, and maybe that number, that 2 million that they're hovering around, are the ones that are staying in on a Friday night and are going to watch it regardless. And that's obviously a problem, because ultimately, that's going to decline, as we've seen over with Raw in the past few years. That number's only ever going to get smaller because the cable audience at large is decreasing.
Yeah.
So unless you...
And old people die.
Well, we can certainly hope in this country. So with with those sort of realities that WWE has to face, unless they make more stars, especially around as we say, Royal Rumble season, WrestleMania season, you can't go into a Rumble where you've got one obvious winner and then 29 goobers. We've seen that before, and those Rumbles are much worse for it. The better ones is when you can, across both brands, you could place maybe 4 or 5 winners. That's when the matches are the most exciting.
Yeah. You know what I'm most looking forward to in 2020 on SmackDown?
What?
Sasha Banks' Snoop Dogg concert.
Oh, God.
Can't wait. Yes, y'all. So fresh, y'all. Snoop Dogg and Sasha Banks are the best, y'all. With lyrics like that, who can't wait
That's
for this
definitely
Snoop
going
Dogg
to happen,
album?
isn't
I just felt like I came at the acoustic version of that, so I don't need to see the real one.
One final question. We reported recently that Ronda Rousey looks set to return to WWE at some point. SmackDown needs her the most, doesn't it?
SmackDown needs her the most, but story-wise, it doesn't make sense to put her on SmackDown, does it? Like,
They don't give a damn about
Yeah.
Raw's situation. Like, she's going
putting
to...
her straight in against Bayley, taking the championship straight away.
Yeah, she's the best chance they've got of actually replicating those adverts that had like Steve Austin and The Rock on. It's like, join us on SmackDown every week for all these people you won't see. And Ronda Rousey's actually on the roster. Like they even do when they go to the adverts. I've noticed on those interstitials, it's like, oh, there's Shorty G. Oh, there's one of the Usos. Hulk Hogan. It's like, he's not after the break, no matter how much you put his picture on there.
They've still got Cain Velasquez buried away somewhere.
Yeah, if she's coming back, she's got to be coming here. It's the same method as the Roman thing, isn't it? It's like, well, he's there, so you've got to come too.
Yeah.
Like the
We're not promising anything, but he'll be there. And she'll be there too,
Yeah.
hopefully,
How
eventually.
do you bring her back, though? Like, she wins the Rumble, and then she points at Bayley and points at Becky and chooses Bayley.
I think you have to have Shayna win the Rumble and point to Becky. And I've just fantasy booked Shayna versus Ronda for Survivor Series, and I'm trying to work my way back, basically.
You could, if you wanted, if Shayna is running at Becky and you have Ronda running at Bayley, you've got this like, there's a lovely little underlying horsewoman narrative there, isn't there? It's like the two MMA horsewomen are going to take out the top dogs of the WWE horsewomen, see you at WrestleMania. You know, and then if you've got Charlotte and Sasha, you can say there's infighting amongst the WWE ones. There is,
There it is.
but we shouldn't say this because
getting ahead
like,
of
ourselves.
they'll-
Hope for anything.
well, normally they only listen to us when we predict the stupid stuff. So we've said this now; it's out there. Thanks for listening as always, WWE. But you're not going to take that idea, are you? It's going to be what was it I said earlier on? Roman in a pet carrier. Like that's the bit that I think, bingo.
Is Roman in Eric Rowan's cage?
Oh my god.
Ronda Rousey is. That's the Gucci goo, baddest woman on the planet.
Let us know
To be
your
fair, it's not that different to our YouTube videos.
Yeah. Let us know your thoughts ahead of SmackDown tonight, though, in the comment section below. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And subscribe to What Culture Wrestling on either iTunes, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts from, for daily wrestling podcasts. Plus, you can let us know your thoughts on Twitter at What Culture WWE. Watch there, follow all three of us. You can follow Phil Chambers at.
At Fill My Chambers.
You can follow Michael Hamflet at.
To the one person that asked me on Twitter, this is not a SmackDown hoodie at Michael Hamflet.
You can follow me at Adam
We
Wilwell.
should get you one of those little Dolph Ziggler hats.
And you can follow us all at What Culture WWE. My thanks to Phil and to Michael. Thank you for watching, and we will see you soon.